Okay. So, I guess I'm going to start by talking a little bit about grieving, mourning. This has been, it was really interesting. It's been rough kind of thing realizing that 150,000 people have died in this country at this time. That's a number which is blows my mind. Um, there's if you look on YouTube, which you may know something about, there's a video. I think it's a New York Times video where they show the rest of the world kind of responding to what has happened here and how what's going on, and a lot of it is just kind of owning Trump and that kind of thing. Okay, fine, whatever. Kind of a pointless thing to be doing at this time, but the the thing is that you look at her and she's like, oh yeah, this is pretty bad. And then they showed her a photo, and I'm going to figure out this YouTube thing well enough at some point to be able to upload or show pictures here. But they showed her a picture of mass graves, and I was also unaware that mass graves were a thing. That was a bit of a surprise to me. So discovering that, I definitely had a bit of a reaction. And then they told her that there was over 100,000 dead, and she just kind of like, takes your breath away. It's hard. It's hard to know that there's so many. I mean, it was weird. It was weird. All right, when the freezer trucks, or the refrigerated trucks, were being put outside the hospitals because there were so many people who were dying. But then when you hear that there's mass graves, I mean, okay, so what's going on here? I mean, is it because this is? Are these people who don't have families, or entire family going? Is it they're getting rid of the bodies so fast? I don't even understand what's going on here. So yeah, it's gotten bad, and I think that's a thing that it's the thing I wasn't ready for. I wasn't ready for the numbers to be this blatantly bad and just be like this. I wasn't prepared. Okay, let's talk about what I wasn't really prepared for. I'm going to pull this up here, actually. So what I was not prepared for was the collateral damage. For me, a lot of that collateral damage is, I mean, sort of there in that it's harder. My daughter needs surgery right now, and it's hard for her to get in and do what needs to be done. But there is another important thing that's happening here, and that is that the hospitals are not a place where people feel safe right now. And let me see if I can get it. All right, so this is my friend Keith. Keith last week. Keith and I worked together as ghost tour guides. He was working inside the building, which they're doing now. They're still not doing the outside part of the tours, which is the part that I do. And he was doing that too, but he was really intent on getting back. And you can see that he's a crafty person. I knew him. He was always telling me about jewelry and how he worked as a jeweler over in the Gainesville area. And you can see him working on some stained glass there. Anyway, so he had he passed out. He fell over, whatever it was, in the midst of a tour inside the building at Ripley's. and the EMTs came to take a look at him, and they said that he probably needed some more attention and that kind of thing, but that the hospitals were very busy, and that he also should think about whether or not that's a thing he wanted to be doing. And I'll be honest with you, Keith was always interested in his own health, and he did not always trust a lot of medicine. And so he decided to go home. Now, home was is well, it used to be a place not far from where I am now. It used to be a place that's over behind. I used to live in a boat over at the marina here, and yeah, he moved. He found a nice little place, probably about 20-40 minutes drive, something like that, inland from here. And I probably shouldn't mention the name, but anyway, his lovely girlfriend had set up out there, and he'd finally gotten things, were starting to get things put together, had a new life coming together. He didn't know what had happened. I don't think anybody did. I mean, even in the Facebook posts, they're saying maybe he died of food poisoning. I'm imagining that that's what he told people he felt like. I was talking to another friend of mine. I should invite these people here when I'm talking about Keith, Daphne, Tim, folks like that. But Daphne was pointing out that, I mean, we are from an era, from an age where you just suck it up. When you're sick, you get through it. You buck it up. You'll get better. Sometimes you shouldn't do that. Keith needed to go to the hospital. Keith needed to realize that it was worse than it was. I miss him. So, I'll be right back. Important thing to do. I don't think there's actually anybody here right now, so that's okay. All right, I'm back. Not that there's anybody here. I think the only reason why that other stream had anybody on it was because I had tagged it as only appropriate for adults, which is true. I mean, it is only appropriate for adults, but because, I mean, we're talking about some very serious stuff here, but I think it gave some people the idea of, what am I going to find? But it at least tells me what's going on out there. All right, so my friend Keith. I'm going to wait a minute for this one. It also kicks on the pump back there.
I didn't think of that.
That's okay.
Sorry, I won't do it again.
Oh, no worries. All right. So, my friend Keith. Well, one of the people who, no matter what, was going to support Bernie Sanders. I'm very sad that even though Bernie will not be running in the general election, that he still is not going to get Keith's vote, because Keith would vote for Bernie no matter what. We sat in this room that I sit in now, and we came up with the designs for T-shirts and stickers and that kind of thing. I do lots of little artsy things. I was doing a little stencil thing at the time, and I was like, I'll do some Bernie stencils and we'll make some Bernie shirts. We hung out here and we designed a bunch of that kind of stuff. That was fun. So, Keith Pace. Now, Keith Pace. There we go. Keep a little bit of light on for him. All right. So, Keith Pace. Now, the thing about Pace is that he always was like, keep up the pace, pick up the pace, that kind of thing, He liked little puns on his name. So I don't think he would have any objection to this. But what I always thought of was peace. Because he was a very peaceable, peaceful man. He was a good guy. I truly feel that at least partially what happened to him can be considered collateral damage. Another death from COVID. Not directly, but I'm going to say this. If we dealt with this, if this were over with, if we could have gotten back to our lives, Keith would be alive right now. So let's talk a little bit about grief. Now, there's some good reasons to talk about grief. One of the biggest things is that grief is so hard to even talk about. We're here, right? I'm here. I'm going to leave this one up. Let's talk about grief for a minute, because we just kind of think it's being sad. We're just sad for a while. That's grief, right? We're sad for a while about a bad thing that happened. Somebody died. People talk to us in soothing tones, and they tilt their head, and they mean so well for you. And if you ever been there, that really doesn't help. So grief, let's talk about it for a minute. So first of all, there's let's talk about grief as a definition, first of all. And one of the more interesting definitions I heard for grief a while ago was that grief is the shape that love takes when someone you love is lost. I loved Keith in his own way. I'll be honest with you, there are not that many people who, going down the street, I see that person, I would stop and I would say hi, be like, hey! No, 4 days, I believe it was, before he died, I did that. I did exactly that. I saw Keith, I stopped, hey, Keith! How you doing? We had a little talk. I asked him about casting gold. It's like, okay, cool. Need to find out more about that from you. Okay, so Grief. Grief is, as I say, it's what we feel when someone we love has passed. Now, the thing to understand about grief is that grief really is its own thing. Grief is not depression, okay? More closely than anything else, and it's around there, grief is trauma. It is similar to post-traumatic stress syndrome, PTSD, but grief is a response to trauma. And the trauma is bereavement. Bereavement is basically meaning, you know what I mean. But strictly speaking, it is the state of having lost someone. Okay, that said. But grief is not depression. Grief is a type of trauma. It's close to PTSD, but it's not. Okay, you see, PTSD is mostly a reaction that falls within the realm of fear and anxiety when you're experiencing PTSD. When you're experiencing grief, as a result of a trauma, you experience PTSD as a result of a trauma, you experience grief as a result of a trauma. When you experience grief as a result of a trauma, it's not so much fear and anxiety. It's longing. Longing. And longing is a word that, well, there's a lot in there. Let's just say that. Then there's yearning. 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 We yearn. I yearn to speak with Keith again about casting gold. He told me, I think the last thing he said to me was that he had cast more gold than there was in the truck that I was in. It's a man I want to learn from. That's a regret. So then there's also this other thing, regrets, recriminations, and appreciations. I really don't have much in the way of recriminations for Keith. I mean, we were co-workers. I knew him well enough. Didn't always agree with him. I didn't always agree with the way that he did his job, but people liked him. Good enough. It's an important part of it all. Regrets that we didn't make those t-shirts. Regrets that those designs never ended up being a thing that we did. Appreciations. The man had a heart that could love the whole world if you let him. Yeah. I mean, he was far from perfect. I mean, I'm not saying he was perfect, but he was a good guy. Oh, wow. It's finally hitting me now. I haven't even gotten this. This is the most I've, yeah. Okay, so I'll talk more about Keith here in a bit. All right, so the thing about grief, though, is all right, I'm going to read this part because this is one of the things that I think is most important to understand. Okay, so it's easy in this whole process of saying that we do well by understanding grief, by demystifying it, and that is important. And that's why there's the 5 stages of grief thing. I'll probably talk about this maybe every time I do this, but The thing about the 5 stages of grief is that it makes it sound like it's a set of steps that you go through, and you go through the steps. It's like the 12 steps and you're done being an alcoholic, right? Okay. I'm going to talk about how realistic or unrealistic that is. But let's just say that, you take these steps and you're done. You're healed. You're no longer grieving. You should be fine now, right? I mean, obviously not, okay? I mean, one thing that goes without saying is that everybody feels this stuff differently. So, yeah, what you're going through is going to be very different. Even the woman who came up with the 5 stages of grief, it's 4, 5, there we go. Even the woman who came up with that later said that it really isn't about... It isn't about, a series of steps that you go through. That many people go through just 2 of the steps, and that's what they need to do for their process. And this is why one of the big things that they say when they're talking about grieving is don't pathologize grief. Don't make it into something that is... Get into something that is supposed to... It's like the guy who does an autopsy. His job is called being a pathologist. Do you want your emotions cut apart the same way that a pathologist would do their job? No. So that's one thing. Now, the other thing about that is that it also sort of implies that grieving is an illness. It's something that you just get over. Far from it. You don't just... There's no point in trying to get over grieving. If you're trying to get over grieving, then you're kind of counting yourself by a weird yardstick there. Let's just put it that way. So let's talk about a little bit of that yardstick. I'm going to link some stuff here, not on this one, but on some other ones. Bless you!
Thank you. Sorry.
That's not coronavirus, I promise. So one of the things is that when we talk about grief in a way like we're getting over, we talk about it like it's a sickness. Grieving has a purpose, okay? Not only does it have a purpose, but in it having a purpose, it's something that we have to do. It's not something that we have to, just kind of get over. And we don't have to go through all the steps of the process and that kind of thing that they talk about. So instead of getting over it, I think this is more of a... Now, as I was saying, there's certain videos that I may link to, but one of them, a woman did a great analogy, and she's like, okay, so if you are this big, okay, right? This big. And your grief, okay, is so big, it fills up all of that space, all right? Completely fills it up. Then, or let's do it like that, actually. That's a better analogy. Okay, so say that your grief is a space that big, all right? And your grief completely fills up that space, all right? And what you try and do is you try and make that grief smaller and smaller and smaller. And now, here's the thing. Grief is something that you feel. Well, what is grief? Grief is the form that love takes. And when you lose someone who's important to you, and now the idea is I'm supposed to take that person who's gone and make that smaller? Does that seem right? Well, no, it's not. It's not right. That's not what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to look at it this way. It's like this. When someone dies, they're gone. It fills up all of that space there. But then life continues. And you adapt, and you move on, and you grow. And while that grief is still the same size inside you, that it was. You are bigger. You have grown around it. You try to grow larger than your grief. You don't get over it like an illness. I'm going to paraphrase Winston Churchill here. Probably better people I could be quoting or paraphrasing, but forgive me. When you're growing through hell, keep growing. One of the things about this is that as that's happening, you don't fight it, but you also don't hold on to it. It's that kind of loose grip where you feel it move in your own hand. You still have got enough tight enough hold on it where you know where it is, but you can feel its movement too. You let the experience do its work. You have that grip, just like that, because it's a balancing act. And you can feel a little bit it's starting to slip and you need to hold a little tighter. And other times we need to let it go. As you grip onto this, as you let go of it, remember that is your own path. Each person has their own path. Find yours. I'm going to read some poetry. It's about halfway through now. With nobody coming in, I'm going to cut this out at an hour in. I need to figure out better ways of promoting this, I think. So this was, you would not be surprised to discover that I'm a Redditor. This was posted today. I thought this was particularly good. This is Michele Dell'Arco. I actually don't know who that is. The poem is entitled On the Necessity of Sadness. Let me tell you about longing. Let me presume that I have something to say about it, that this room naked, its walls pining for clocks, has something new to say about absence. Has something new to say about absence. Somewhere, the crunch of an apple fading, sunflowers on a quilt, a window looking out to a landscape with a single tree, and you sitting under it. Let go, said you to me in a dream. But by the time wind carried your voice to me, I was already walking through the yawning door, towards the small, necessary sadness of waking. I wish that I could hold you now, but that is a line that has no place in a poem, like the swollen sheen of the moon tonight, or the word absence, or you, or longing. Let me tell you about longing. In a distant country, two lovers are on a bench, and pigeons, unafraid, are perching beside them. She places a hand on his knee and says to me, say to me the truest thing you can. I am closing my eyes now. You are far away. A Prayer in Spring by Robert Frost. Oh, give us pleasure in the flowers today, and give us not to think so far away as the uncertain harvest. Keep us here, all simply in the springing of the year. Oh, give us pleasure in orchard white, like nothing else by day, like ghosts by night, and make us happy in the bees, swarm dilating round the perfect trees. And make us happy in the darting bird that suddenly above the bees is heard, the meteor that thrusts with its needle bill, and off a blossom in mid-air stands still. For this is love, and nothing else is love, for which is reserved for God above, to sanctify for what ends he will, but only to which needs that we fulfill. Yeah, that's the thing about Robert Frost. He saw a lot of sadness in his time. He knew a little bit about grieving. He knew a little bit about death. So let's talk a little bit about coronavirus, because there is a lot of grief that is happening here as a result of it. That's Zero. He's a good boy. So one of the things that makes grieving with COVID a little bit more complicated. Oh, let's see that it's hot in here and I'm sweating. Isn't that pleasant? Oh. All right. One of the things about all of this is the enforced distance that exists. Oh, that's much better. Oh, rays from the outside. Very nice. Probably can hear the crickets better, but that's okay. They're crickets. All right. So one of the things about all of this is the enforced distance that's happening, and that's really hard, because we come together for things like this. We come together for things like this for a reason. First of all, we, lack of a better way, I'm not going to call it celebrate, but we mark great passages together. At some point, perhaps we'll all get together and say what a great person Keith was. Yeah, I look forward to that. But right now we can't. And oh my God, his girlfriend. Oh, I don't know her well enough, but I have to reach out to her. Right now, I'd just be another person. I'm going to wait a little minute before I do that. But when I do, yeah, I hope I can be helpful. I don't know if I can. So I'm going to tell you this. If you're trying to help someone who's grieving, don't do what I'm doing here. I mean, do what I'm doing here. That's part of it. But I'm just doing this because I'm hoping somebody eventually shows up and calls. Still waiting on a call. Phone number's in the comments. So what you can do is be present and listen. There are certain things that you can tell people to do that'll help, but you have to understand that who's going to die when he died anyway? He died in the right place. I'm glad he was there. Regardless of what I think of Herman Cain, regardless of the fact that I think that he may have helped other people, hindered other people. I think he harmed other people. I think he helped them get sick. Here's the truth. Even the one Cain didn't deserve that. And so, reason why I bring up that enforced distance is it strikes me that that enforced distance is part of why his Twitter account was so weird. He's talking about how it's being overblown just hours before he died of it. Now, I mean, obviously that Twitter account was not his. That was being run by his managers, his family, somebody. And so he died alone. I don't know how alone, but hopefully not completely alone. But I don't know. I mean, oh my God, what are they doing now? Each hospital's different. We make fun of Karens. I'll tell you what, I'm a Karen sometimes. Yeah. No, I'll say it. I am. Couldn't be there for someone that I dearly loved if you tried to keep me from them in their passing. Yeah. Let's just say that I'd pull out all the stops. So one of the things about all of that is that I say that. But is that true? Another thing that's happening with all of this is that just being in this environment of COVID, in this environment of sickness, it wears on us so much. It wears on us to the point that we barely have the energy to give our love to anyone else. We're irritable. I'm irritable. And so we say that. I say that I would not let someone keep me away. Till that moment comes, I don't know that that's true. And this is the thing that you also have to say. You've done everything you can. There are times when if I Karen'd it, I'm in jail. More bad news for my loved one on their way out, right? Hopefully not. You never know how it's going to end up. So I'm not going to say that I would do that. I could have done that, or I would have done that. What I am going to say is this. Each one of us in these moments is doing everything we can. I don't think there's a moment where even the person in I don't know if you've got a family that has done this, but you know, where there's the person in the family who just like looks at what's going on, can't say anything, ducks out, gets drunk, whatever it is. I hate to tell you this. They're doing everything they can too. So, forgive them. More importantly, forgive yourself. Now, one of the things that we talk about, one of the things that is important, very important, when you are dealing with grief, is to be able to, you don't know how, but to be able to see that somehow a life will continue for you. The problem is this. Right now with COVID, we don't even know what life is going to look like. Um, it's about to be August, right? So I kind of knew we were going to be here. I hate to say this, but I was enough of a pessimist about this that, well, let's just say I believe in science. And when people started ridiculing the scientists, I went, oh no, we're in trouble. So I'm not surprised that we're here. A lot of us are. I'm also not going to be surprised that when the new year comes, hot and sweaty, and there's crickets out there. I'm going to be okay. What the hell is the flu season going to be like north of here? Jesus, we get another round of illness, like like just a, oh my god. I don't know what's going to happen. I really don't. I'm also afraid because I think that there's a very good chance that the current occupant of the White House will be voted out by that point in time. I also think there's a very good chance that that occupant will not be doing as much as they could to help us out during that winter. It could be a very long time from early November to the third week of January. I hope we're okay. A winter of discontent. So, one of the things about all of this is that in that uncertainty, we're also struck by, like, did we do everything we could? There's also blame. We blame the doctors. Me, I blame the politicians. There's a lot of people to blame. Remember not to blame yourself. Very important. Here's the thing. The blame is not going to help you that much. It will help you understand that it is not you who should be blamed. I mean, but it's also hard to get over the fact that those people are still saying what they're saying. So we try to make sense of it. And in this process, we come up with basically garbage thinking, counterfactual thinking. We come up with things that are as superstitious as the guy who is convinced that his team always wins because he wears red socks on game day. Remember that there's a lot of thinking where you can find a way to blame yourself. And doing that is pointless. Okay, not entirely. Let's actually break this down. I'm not going to say discard it for no reason. But here's how it works. You feel that way because, if anything, there is a lesson to be learned. That's an important thing to remember, because then you ask yourself, what is that lesson? Then you ask yourself, is that a valid lesson? Okay, so if, excuse me, if you come up with, I should have, if the lesson you come up with is I should always, like at the drop of a hat, go and run and do whatever, relative X says to do at that time because I didn't, that person died, or whatever it may be. Well, that's just not right, is it? I mean, you can tell that's not right. You can tell that that's an overreaction. And so now you can extrapolate, you can work backwards. You can say, okay, if the thing that I would learn from that would be that I should always just jump to and be, an unthinking servant, then maybe you can go back to the thing that you're blaming yourself for and put that off and realize that taking that guilt, taking that blame is just as pointless as trying to say in the future, I'm going to be perfect in this way, or I'm going to do exactly that. If, on the other hand, the lesson is wear a mask when you're around old people, wear a mask when you're around old people. It's not that hard. For other people, the lesson is going to be a little bit harder. For some people, the lesson is, I'm going to sound like Ben Shapiro for a second, and I hate him. But just because you feel trapped inside, just because you feel like the mask is something that you shouldn't have to wear, the fact is, it saves lives. The fact is, it doesn't care how you feel about it. The virus doesn't. The virus will spread by. So that's the lesson there. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that I don't blame you, and you shouldn't blame yourself for not wearing a mask, even if that's what you think might have caused it. Instead, understand that you need to learn how to be more honest with your relationship with the world, with the truth,